Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Patch 3.19 is coming in about a week's time, and we got today the patch notes, but most importantly for a lot of people, we got the full details of what's happening with the Trickster. I'll put a link down below if you just want the information on the Trickster overhaul, but if you want to discuss everything, I'm going to give my first impressions on these changes. I think that the Trickster is going to be a clear speed fiend, and it's going to be adequate but not outstanding at boss killing in the next league. Think of it as somewhat of the opposite of a 3.18 Saboteur. 3.18 Saboteur being an absolute bossing fiend and just sort of adequate without being great at clear speed. The Trickster is going to be the exact reverse of that. What are the changes? Well, it's very different to 3.18. The 3.18 Trickster had no cohesive design. It's basically all been scrapped, and now there's a whole lot of new options. Two massive life recovery options. There's Polymath, which is one of the best nodes that any Ascendancy has access to, albeit not one that every build can use. And there's Soul Drinker, providing overleech as a life recovery method against bosses. So let's start with the nodes that are connected to Escape Artist. Escape Artist is the 2-point node that then has two further 2-point nodes extending out from it. So if you want to take Soul Drinker or Spellbreaker, they're going to cost you 4 points. You're going to have to pick up Escape Artist as well. Escape Artist is granting you 5 evasion rating per 1 maximum energy shield on your helmet, and 1 maximum energy shield per 6 evasion rating on your body armor. If you've got a helmet that's providing you with 350 energy shield, then that's going to be 2100 evasion rating. If you've got a chest piece that is providing you with 2700 evasion rating, this is going to be 450 energy shield. This is actually a big deal defensively. This is a lot of both of these stats that you're getting. And the benefits of having a high evasion rating and a high energy shield simultaneously is that most attacks that are made against you miss. As long as you're not taking a massive amount of hits in a short period of time, you should be able to take the edge off some of those hits and also rely upon the powers of Ghost Shrouds in order to replenish some of the energy shield that you lose this way. This is a quite powerful defensive setup and one that's been working well for the Trickster for a while, really ever since Ghost Shrouds were first introduced to the game. In terms of the options that are behind Escape Artist, you have Spellbreaker, which is a 20% chance to suppress spell damage, prevents 10% of suppressed spell damage while you are on full energy shield, and a 50% chance for energy shield recharge to start when you suppress spell damage. Essentially, what I think with Spellbreaker here is that when you're suffering hits that are spell-based from enemies, this is going to seriously take the edge off it, especially if you're managing to cap your spell suppression across your entire character. This 10% additional prevention of suppressed spell damage is a big deal, and it's not always going to be active, but if your energy shield is much lower than your evasion rating, what you'll find is that your Ghost Shrouds may actually replenish all of your energy shield before the next spell hits. So as long as you've got Ghost Shrouds to burn, and remember, you can only have 3 of them at a time, you should be in a situation where you are often suppressing not just 50% of spell damage, but actually 60% here, and you can get more of that stat elsewhere on the tree as well. So Spellbreaker is a pretty strong defense against spell-based hits. Where it's weaker though is against spell-based damage over time. It does very little there. All in all, I think Spellbreaker is a pretty good choice if you want to be defensive. It's certainly not for everyone. It is one of the weaker nodes in the overall Ascendancy, but it will be used. Next, we have Soul Drinker, which is the overleech mechanic. This is something that was available in 3.18, but only as a Forbidden Jewel exclusive notable, something that you could only get by defeating the Uber Searing Exarch and the Uber Eater of Worlds. If you're able to get both of those bosses down, then you could get Soul Drinker eventually, but you will probably need to do that in a trade league because those specific jewels were very rare. Soul Drinker is joining the Trickster Ascendancy generally, and the previous notable that it is replacing is Harness the Void. That is being removed from the Trickster Ascendancy and is going to go to those Forbidden Jewels. So Soul Drinker is going to cause you to have 2% Universal Energy Shield Leech. Damage you deal, whether it be attacks, whether it be spells, is going to be leeched as energy shield. Note that this is going to recover you a lot of energy shield if you are hitting enemies with hits. If you're damaging enemies with damage over time, it's going to do basically nothing for you. Now, while you're actively leeching energy shield, you're going to get 20% attack and cast speed, and energy shield leech effects are not removed when energy shield is filled. This is extraordinarily powerful in conjunction with energy leech support, and Soul Drinker will always be used on builds that are using energy leech, and the two of them go together extraordinarily well. This is something I would suggest considering if you are doing bossing. If your Trickster is going to be doing bossing, you probably want Soul Drinker. You definitely take Escape Artist and Soul Drinker, and you might even consider Spellbreaker as well. Lots of good stuff in this area. If, on the other hand, you want to make a clear speed fiend, you may actually issue all of these, or you may take just Escape Artist, or you might decide to go with Escape Artist and one of the other two. That's ultimately up to you, But let's go to the other nodes now. So there are 4 2-point nodes. There is Heartstopper, which is conditional damage mitigation that is much better than it looks. It looks pretty bad, but I think it's actually pretty good. There is Polymath, which is the big draw to playing the Trickster, damage and recovery together, and lots of both of them. There is Swift Killer, which grants you 2 maximum frenzy charges and is really good for builds that want to stack frenzy charges and not something that you would take on anyone else. And then there's One Step Ahead, which is the action speed modifier, which is actually a very, very, very strong node that will be taken by a lot of people too. Heartstopper is first. So every 10 seconds, you take 40% less damage from hits for 5 seconds. Then you take 40% less damage over time for 5 seconds. One of these is active at any given time, and you don't have any control or agency over which one is active at any given point. So it's not like you can say, hey, the Shaper's slamming me, I'm going to pop up a guard skill and endure it. You probably still need to dodge, but 50% of the time that you get it wrong, you will have Heartstopper in play, and that will take some of the edge off it and possibly leave you still alive. So if you're just generally mapping and you take a burst of 10,000 damage in the space of 200 milliseconds, this is going to kill a character most of the time. But if you've got Heartstopper active, then there's a 50% chance that you randomly don't die instead. Instead, you take 6,000 damage and maybe your character just endures that and just comes through with a sliver of life. So this is actually a pretty big deal, and it's why I think that Heartstopper is better than it looks. 50% of the time you would kill over dead, you probably actually have a second chance of living. The other 50%, well, you still go splat. The other thing that's significant and needs to be talked about is that there are a number of places in the game, particularly Pinnacle bosses, Eldritch Altars, and Delve, where you will simultaneously be taking damage over time and damage from hits. Now, in a lot of these cases, the damage from hits is more lethal, but the damage over time adds up, and often it softens you up enough that then a hit that would otherwise not be lethal does kill you. So let's say that the Elder is firing Icicle Barrages at you in the Uber Elder fight, and these do 4,000 damage to your character. And you're standing in a pile of goo on the ground that is dealing 4,000 damage per second in physical degen. Well, in this situation, if you've got 5,500 life, you're actually in a pretty strong spot. So either you're in a situation where the Elder's projectiles are doing 2,400 damage, and the pile of goo on the ground is doing 4,000 a second, which means you've got about 775 milliseconds to get out of that goo before you're dead. Or alternately, it's the other way around. The Elder's doing full damage, but the pile of goo on the ground is doing only 2,400 damage a second. And in this situation, again, you've got well over half a second to get out of that goo on the ground, 625 milliseconds. Heartstopper is giving you a lot more chances to get out of there. If you were doing this without Heartstopper, you would only be able to survive 375 milliseconds. And so there is a huge difference, whichever setup you're on, whether you're on the protection from hits or the protection from dots, either way, it's going to be a good deal in that sort of fight. So definitely in encounters like Uber Elder, the Cortex, the Feared, Uber Cortex, all these sorts of encounters where there is both damage on the ground and there's also damage coming from hits, Heartstopper is going to be very, very good there. In other spots, it may be a bit weaker, but that's still fine. It will not be ever completely useless because about 50% of the time, it is just going to randomly save you from some mistake you make that would have otherwise made you go splat. Next, we have Polymath, and this is one of the major reasons you want to consider being a Trickster. This is 3% more damage for each different type of mastery you have allocated. Very important to say that if you've got 2 fire masteries, that only counts as one type of mastery. So if you've got 1 fire mastery and 1 lightning, that's 2 different types of mastery. That's the starting point, and that alone would probably almost be worth taking. A lot of endgame builds, that's going to be 18% more damage if you don't go out of your way to optimize it. Maybe 21 or even 24% if you do, but that may require an opportunity cost of taking a couple of points you might not otherwise have taken. But the thing that's really significant is the Omni Recovery. 1% life, energy shield, and mana regained on kill for each different type of mastery you have allocated. This can easily be 6, 7, 8% life recovery on kill, which is going to make you nearly invincible as long as you are blitzing through a map and killing things fast. If damage doesn't kill you within a couple of frames after you're taking it, while you're propagating damage explosion chains through a map, then that damage didn't happen because you'll have recovered all of your life, all your energy shield, and also all of your mana, which is a big bonus as well. Polymath looks absolutely fantastic for this reason. Getting both of these effects at once is phenomenal. I honestly think that you would consider taking just the damage component, you would consider taking just the recovery component, but when you get both of them together, you get one of the best Ascendancy notables in the entire game. Always take this, make it work somehow. Even if in a couple of clusters where you wouldn't normally have taken a mastery at all, you end up having to spend a point on a mastery that doesn't do very much for you, you still want to do that because it's going to be worth it with Polymath. You're going to get paid off in spades. Swift Killer is next. This is +2 maximum frenzy charges and also massively increases your charge duration. Charge duration's in an interesting place, and this is enough of it in one place that you can actually count on for smaller bosses, especially ones without invulnerability phases. You can just count on getting your charges while you're mapping, then taking them into the boss and having them for the entire boss fight. That's not going to work for big bosses. It's certainly not going to work for bosses like the Elder that are fought in their own arena, but for bosses that are fought in the end of a map, such as, for example, Drox the Conqueror, this is something that will be available. So how do you get those charges? I suggest potentially specking Overcharged on the classic passive tree. That is an 8% chance to gain a random type of charge when you kill a monster, and that works really well with Swift Killer. Now, this is niche. Don't take it without powerful frenzy charge synergies, or potentially if you're just intending to go absolutely clear speed focus, razor focus on clear speed. Next, we have One Step Ahead, which is also fantastic. Your action speed is at least 108% of base value. Nearby enemies' monster action speed is at most 92% of base value. Now, we really need to talk about what action speed is here. Action speed is a Tailwind/Chill-esque stat. So Tailwind, Chill, and Freeze are multiplicative modifiers to your character's attack speed, cast speed, and movement speed. On the flip side, you have additive modifiers, such as a Quicksilver Flask, which is an additive increase to your movement speed, or various mods on items that say increased attack speed. So that 108% of base value does two things for you. Firstly, it makes you effectively immune to Freeze and Chill. You're not actually completely immune to them, but a Freeze that would reduce your action speed to 0, or a Chill that might reduce it to 70% of base, is instead going to reduce it from 108% to 108%. If you did have an enhanced action speed from some other source, maybe you had the Greater Harbinger of Time effect from the Flow Untethered going at the time, then it's going to reduce it from 110 to 108%, so it's a slight debuff, but even then it's probably not noticeable. So yeah, basically this is permanent Tailwind and immunity to Freeze and Chill for all intents and purposes. Very, very solid upside on this. The second line, nearby enemy monster action speed is at most 92% of base value. This is much more disappointing, but it does do something. What this does not do is suppress various monster mechanics that grant additional speed. So things that add additional run speed to monsters, like the Hasted Archnemesis modifier, they will not be suppressed by this. However, things that add action speed to monsters, such as the Frenzied Archnemesis modifier, will be suppressed by this. Which one's which, it's not really clear, and it's just a whole list of exceptions that you either have to learn or, like most players will do, you just ignore it and just accept that sometimes this will work, sometimes it won't. However, even against monsters that it's not amazing on, it is still an 8% strength Temporal Chains aura, so it's something that just slows down monsters around you a little bit. We need to know how big nearby is on this. If nearby is a large radius, then it's a lot better. If it's a small radius, then it might be pretty underwhelming. You take One Step Ahead for the 108% line. The 92% line is a small bonus and not very important to the overall strength of the mod. You're taking it for the other mod and you're happy with it, even if it just had the 108% mod. Your default bossing setup. So this assumes that you are set on being a Trickster, as you may wish to consider being a Saboteur instead if you want to specialize in boss killing. The Trickster is not a boss killing specialist ascendancy, but it is serviceable at it. So you want to take Escape Artist and Soul Drinker, which is the Leech node, and then you take any two of One Step Ahead, Polymath, Spellbreaker, and Heartstopper. And that's going to depend upon the specific bosses you want to focus on. Heartstopper goes up in value against bosses that leave enduring bad stuff on the ground, such as Uber Elder, Cortex the Feared, and down against hit-based bosses like Atsuri or Maven's Invitation the Formed. So for mapping, you want to go with Polymath, you want to go with One Step Ahead, and then you can take any two other nodes. To empower Polymath further, you may want to consider taking masteries that would otherwise be marginal on your build, as long as they're in clusters you are already taking on the passive tree. Don't take entire clusters though just for Polymath, because you will get 18% damage, 6% recovery without even trying. Going to 21 and 7 is worth it if you can, as long as the cost isn't too high, but you don't want to spend a fortune in passive points just to get to 27 and 9, because 18 and 6 is going to do the job. Anyway, that's the Trickster. That's my first thoughts on it. May your Valorps have interesting results, and I will see you around.